Hello, it's Jason Heath with Contrabass Conversations, bringing you the second of 6 solo shows here in the month of March 2019. This is a bit of a departure for the show, but it's fun for me and I hope it will be fun for you. And we are talking today about aligning your life's activities, which, what do I mean by that? So that's what we're going to talk about. Like everybody, I wear many different hats. I am a podcaster, I am a teacher, I work for the ISB, I'm a consultant for various companies, I write, all kinds of things. And I'm always in this sort of swirl of activities, and I'm trying to figure out how to best spend my time, what to focus on next, when. And I have been working these last few years at making projects and working on projects that I can repurpose for other things. I drew, as I was preparing for this podcast, 3 diagrams, which I shall describe to you since this is audio. One is a series of arrows all going in the same direction. And I think about this a lot with projects I'm working on. Can I align these projects so that I'm kind of working on them all at once, or some of them at once? For example, I am currently the marketing chair for the International Society of Bassists. I also have my own podcast, and I do consulting work for various companies. Is there a way that I can align those activities so one activity can serve the needs of these multiple purposes? And the answer is very often yes. So rather than chasing my tail and switching to and fro for all these different activities, is there a way that I can align the things in my life so that I'm working on multiple domains at once? And that is, to me, a great thing to think about when taking projects. If I take a project and I dig into it, what is the end result? Is it just going to lead to more of that exact same project, or is it something that could spin off into something greater? So this podcast that you're listening to right now, I think of as a great example of that. The podcast for me is a byproduct. This may sound weird, but I really do believe this. And I've come to believe this even more firmly in the last few years. The podcast is actually a byproduct of activities I'm doing in my life. It's actually a vehicle for connecting with interesting people, and it's kind of a rough draft that I can then repurpose for other activities. For me, the value is the connection. Chatting with somebody that I just got to know, or somebody that I've wanted to talk to for years, or an old friend, and we're reconnecting about a different topic, and that is a beautiful thing in and of itself. The podcast is just an added benefit. It's a way to put that out to the world. And then we have this kind of first draft of content. And what can we do with that? Well, I like to think of repurposing in all these different projects. So a podcast can also become an article. We could flesh it out. I can transcribe it. I can take multiple podcasts and put them together to put some sort of best of together that I can then transcribe into an article. I could take that article or that podcast and I could turn it into a talk or a clinic that I'm doing. Or I could take that clinic or podcast or blog or what have you, and I could turn that into a video. Or I could take a series of podcasts and turn that into a video or a series of videos, or vice versa. And that comes to another image that I drew as I was thinking about this aligning life's activities concept. And that's just a circle with arrows just sort of chasing each other. So one project feeds another project, feeds another project. And I love repurposing and revisiting old content. A great example of that back in 2016 was my Winning the Audition series, which started out as a podcast series, which was highlights from a past of 150, 200 podcast episodes. Then I took and I transcribed that audio. So that was an audio project. I transcribed that and turned it into a written book, so a fleshed out book. I then narrated the book. It's sort of meta, but I narrated the book and turned it into an audio book, which you can buy on Audible. So there's a project that I've repurposed in multiple ways. And then I've taken that material and I've turned that Winning the Audition concept into a session and a clinic that I've done at various events. So as I'm working on a project or taking on a project, I'm always thinking about how I can let this grow and evolve and develop. And that brings me to the third image that I drew as I was preparing for this chat right here, this solo episode, and that's of an object, a project, and arrows just emanating out from it, kind of like a planet, and there are these little arrows taking off from it. So those are my three images I think about as I'm digging into projects. Can I find something where I align it with all the other things I do, the other hats I wear? Can I make each project inform the other? And can I have a project blossom out to feed all sorts of other new ideas? And I find thinking about that so valuable when I'm deciding what to focus on and what to dig into. Now, I had many, many, many years where I did not align my activities in this way, and I want to go through and just sort of share this journey with you. Some of you have been with me for years, have heard this story, but I'm going to dig into it in a different light, kind of with this, trying to figure out how to align your activities together. And I want to start off by talking about something that I've spoken about many times with my wife, which is Gretchen Rubin, and I will put a link to this in the show notes. Gretchen Rubin, great author, about her 4 tendencies. Let me read from Gretchen's website, and again, check this out. It's very cool, and there's a quiz that you can take. Gretchen says about the 4 tendencies in just about any role we play. As manager, healthcare professional, team member, teacher, coach, spouse, parent, or colleague, to name a few, it's helpful to know our own and other people's tendencies. It's hard to grasp just how differently we can all see the world. When we see each other's perspectives, we understand why, from their point of view, their actions make sense. So Gretchen has 4 categories of people and their tendencies. And here are the categories. They are upholders, questioners, obligers, and rebels. Here's a bit about each category. Upholders want to know what should be done. So an upholder is someone who upholds commitments to themselves, to other people. If it's on the calendar, their priority is to make that happen. Questioners want justifications. So questioners are always wondering why. Why should this be this way? Why should I do this? Obligers need accountability. Obligers are people that are focused on doing for others, regardless of what that does for their own personal benefit. And rebels want freedom to do something their own way. So my wife and I have talked several times about which category each of us inhabit. And she has told me time and time again that I'm a rebel. And I kind of feel like I'm an upholder. I think that we can be more than one of these. In many ways, when I do make a commitment, I do follow through and I stick with it. But I have also come to agree over time that I think the rebel streak is in me. I really do like doing things my own way. And if I look at my life, I've sort of chafed at being told what to do. Let me just expand on that for a moment. I think just the choice of doing a music degree at all for anybody adds a little bit of rebel to their life. It is definitely not a safe choice. I don't think many would think that. So I do think that there is a little bit of a counterculture element to anybody who does go into music, go after music. That is not something that probably everybody in your life, every advisor, every influential figure thought was a great idea. I mean, maybe for some people, but probably that was seen and is a bit of a rebel choice. So I personally, I made that choice. So did my wife and most of you who are listening, or many of you who are listening to this. Also, I go through school. I then exit school, went to Northwestern University, exit school, started freelancing, which is also a little bit of a nomadic rebel sort of lifestyle, trying to create your own life. I did not immediately go and get a job, any type of job, just to have a job. I decided to just put out my shingle and come what may, I try this. And by the way, all of this sort of stuff, my father passed away 5 years ago, but I can't help but back when he was still alive and even now look and see so many parallels between Jay Heath, my sweet dad, and my life. And I think my dad definitely had that rebel streak as well. And as I look at those freelance years and what I've done ever since, I kind of look at his career and what he did, and I see in me him and his choices too. So I think the apple does not fall far from the tree in the Heath family. So I rebelled against the rebel freelance life. I said, this is not for me. I find this soulless and vacuous. That's maybe sounding a little harsh, but that's the way I felt at the time. After doing that for several years, even within the freelance world, I bounced around and tried different things and kept on thinking that I would find my groove, find my niche. And I decided to again rebel in kind of a weird way, very non-rebellious rebellion. I decided to quit taking auditions, and I just was sick of taking orchestra auditions and go back to school and get a music education degree. Again, not a very rebellious rebellion, but I think that sort of qualifies still. Also, when I decided to, the reason why you are listening to this and why I have become known as a figure in the bass world is because of this particular rebellion, which was I decided I was going to quit caring about what other people thought about me and my decisions and just start telling things the way I saw them. And many of you don't know about, actually, you know what? We're going to take an advertiser break and we will be back in just a moment. I want to share this with you. So let's give a shout out to a few of our sponsors here. Thank you for keeping the lights on here at Contrabass Conversations, whether it's me flying solo or with all the hundreds of guests we've had over the years. We will be right back in a moment with more of this tale of rebellion. This episode is brought to you by the Bass Violin Shop, which opened in 2001 as a small double bass workshop in Greensboro, North Carolina. Today, they're staffed by 3 full-time, highly skilled bass luthiers, and they specialize in double bass sales, rentals, setup, restoration, and repair. For nearly 20 years, they have satisfied thousands of clients by offering quality instruments, knowledgeable service, reliable repairs, and superior restorations at affordable prices. They offer high-quality, custom ebony C extensions with 2 different chromatic latch options, handmade ebony latches with adjustable aluminum mounts by New Harmony Music, or adjustable brass latches by Rob Anzalotti. Give the Bass Violin Shop a call to discuss your extension needs. For more information and current inventory, visit their website at bassviolinshop.com and be sure to follow them on Facebook and Instagram. This episode is brought to you by D'Addario Strings. Our friends at D'Addario want to help listeners change their strings safely and efficiently, and they have a few tricks to help you achieve that. When you pull the string through the peg, twist it around itself a few times before continuing to wind. This pulls more of the string through the peg neatly, and it decreases the likelihood of the string falling out of tension. Learn more at orchestral.daddario.com, and thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. There are a lot of career options out there for musicians, and Barry Colstein of Colstein Music has some great advice about keeping your options open.
I generally will tell anybody that goes off to, going as performance, go after your dreams, but also prepare yourself, because it's not always the easiest profession to pursue. And I'm a firm believer that in life you pick up as much knowledge as you can. Those are your armament in life, and you put them in your back pocket. You may never have to draw upon it, but it's a nice thing to have.
Colstein & Sons, for 70 years now, has been working to connect bass players with the finest instruments and help them achieve their goals and find those opportunities in their lives. Thank you so much to Barry and everybody at Colstein Music for sponsoring the podcast. Hello, we're back, and thank you so much again to the sponsors for making this happen. It's so cool to have these folks on board and making this show work here as we approach episode 600. 600! What? Okay, back to rebellion. So the reason why you are listening to this or may have heard my name is because I started a blog back in 2005, which maybe doesn't seem like that radical thing to do. It's not a radical thing to do at all, but I decided to just start telling it like it is, writing all the crazy things that happened to me on gigs, just being really honest and raw about my experiences and my frustrations, frankly, with the music world, the freelance world. I think I had a lot of pent-up anger from that world. I'm a very different person in a very different place now, here, 14, 15 years later, than I was when I was doing that. It's kind of funny to go back, not that I do this all the time, but go back and look at what I was writing, what I was thinking, what I was feeling, and I really have evolved a lot in my thinking and my feelings and what I'm focusing on back from when I started this back in 2005. Okay, zooming back out to the title of this episode, Aligning Your Life's Activities. If I look at that time when I started the blog and then also started the podcast, this was in the mid-2000s. This is when I had decided to get rid of my freelance career, to set fire to it, metaphorically, and go back to school. And I went back into debt and all that sort of lovely, lovely business. And talk about your life's activities not being aligned. I remember just how jarring it was to go and sit in these undergrad music ed courses, and then I would run over and I would write all this angry prose on my laptop at the local coffee shop, and then I would dash off and sub in the Lyric Opera of Chicago for a show, and then although it was all still within the music world, it definitely felt like all the arrows were pointing in different directions, and boy, was I frustrated taking those music ed classes. I was so on the verge of quitting. In fact, I had decided to quit, and my father talked me off the ledge. He said, look, you're this far along. You've thrown however many thousands of dollars at this thing. Just get the degree. I had decided that I'd made a mistake, and I was totally, talk about two arrows going in a totally different direction. The podcast and the blog and the tech projects were hitting. I was getting hired for all sorts of different things. I was I remember the day that the New Yorker linked to me, which might not seem like a big deal, but to me that was a very big deal. The New Yorker, what? I click on it, it goes right to my site. Okay, that was cool. I remember the day that International Musician did a profile on me about what I was building. And I remember the consulting gigs and the speaking engagements coming in. And this was the same exact period of time when I then had to go to trumpet methods class, where I was 10, 11, 12 years older than everybody else in the class. And I remember my percussion methods. Sitting there, I was planning to go to the ISB convention, and this was the only time I was able to go to the ISB, International Society of Bassists convention, until 2017, because I was tied up in school jobs. So this is back in 2009. And I remember, or was it 2000? Yeah, 2009, Penn State. And we were trying to reschedule our percussion final for a mutually agreeable time. And I remember one of the students said, oh, I can't do that time. We all found a time that was earlier that I could do. And this student said, I can't do that. And we all said, why? He said, because I've got prom. And I thought, prom? What are you talking about? Then I realized, oh, this guy's 18. His girlfriend's a senior in high school. They're only a year apart. And then I realized, oh, I'm the fish out of water. This stinks. So I was already rebelling against the rebellion of the rebellion of the rebellion, wanting to get out of that school thing. By the way, I'd been in school for about 2 years. This 2-year theme continues to follow me along in life. I'm good for any activity for 2 years. Year 1, I'm getting acquainted with that opportunity and maximizing it. Year 2, I'm looking for the next opportunity. Oh my goodness, this has happened to me so many times through my career, and I at least know myself, and I know that is something that I do. So I try to spot that as I go forward. So I pretty much decided that I'd wasted my money on this education degree, but I got it. Okay, fine. We'll see what happened. I remember applying for some full-time jobs, and I never got one interview. And I thought, well, look, I have chops. I've played with all these groups. I'm a seasoned, professional-ish kind of bass player, taught at university. Nothing's hitting for me. And then I have this kind of wacky internet career, and this was happening at this point 10 years ago. Of course, nobody was interested in that in the school world. That was just like a dangerous, bizarro liability. If anything, the school that I was, or one of the schools that I was private teaching at, teaching bass lessons, had an opening for a part-time job, but that had benefits, and I got the job, and I remember thinking, about how great this job sounded, because it sounded like I was basically just going to be doing sectionals, but with the different string instruments and a little bit of band. So basically what I had already been doing, but I'd be on salary. Well, it turned out not to be the case. I got there day one or day two, and they said, all right, you're going to be conducting all these different groups, and you're going to be conducting symphonic band a little bit, which was quite a trip. This 100-person goof-off band. I got really good at kicking a kid out of band and keeping band rehearsal going. Never thought I'd get good at that. And I remember being totally kind of bummed that I was going to actually have to be doing conducting and being up there. I did not see that as my calling. I don't think it is my calling, frankly, between you and me, but I definitely did not see that as my calling 10 years ago. And I sort of, my heart sank as I realized that this is something I was going to be doing. Well, over the weeks and months, I started to kind of get a groove for it, and I became obsessed with it. I started reading all these books on conducting. I started watching all these videos on conducting. And you know, this is an educational setting. I really do think that there is an educational conducting skill set that, while it overlaps quite a bit with a professional conducting skill set, it is distinctly different. So I would not call myself a conductor in that that maybe traditional sense, but I have done, I've probably made as much money conducting as anything else in my life at this point. So as that first year went by, I started to like it. I turned a corner. I went from not liking it to liking it. And I kind of rebelled against my tech career that I had built. I shut that podcast down. I shut the blog down. If you followed along long time, you will remember this, about like a 5-year gap. At least, right? I think maybe even more than 5 years in the podcast. I put out 160 episodes between 2007 and 2009. I got that full-time job and I put out a few, and then, or not full-time job, part-time job, but got that job and then started to fall in love with it. And you can actually look at the podcast decrease in publication and my enjoyment of that job. There's a total inverse relationship. So the podcast, I quit responding to anybody emailing me about bass stuff or blog stuff or podcast stuff, and I rebelled against it. Done. And I remember I sort of cheesed a lot of people off because they'd say, you never responded to me from 5 years ago. And it's like, well, look, dude, I'd let it go. Of course, people didn't realize that, but that's just how it was. Then 2 years in that job, and another job opened up. If you've ever seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off, the movie, I got hired at that high school in that school district, and for a very different job, orchestra, but also electronic music, which I totally fell in love with, and I became obsessed with and started studying like a maniac, spent probably 4 to 6 hours a day watching YouTube videos and buying gear and writing stuff at Ableton Live. And I went all in for 2 years, built up this big program. We'll talk about this later in this 6-episode arc. And while I was still doing the orchestra thing, I decided this is what I want to do with my time. I want to teach electronic music. I want to teach DJing. This is totally amazing. Then another job opened up 2 years later. Again, 2 years. I got hired at what really is considered one of the best high school jobs, music jobs in the state of Illinois. So thrilled and honored to get that job. And what was even cooler about that was the person that was retiring, his name is Frank Listina. He was the person that kind of inspired me to go into music education, to pursue that in the first place. By the way, both my parents were teachers. I was around teachers my whole life. My extended family's all teachers. That was definitely the safe path, the Heath path. My brother is also a teacher, and I rebelled against that back when I was 17, 18, going into performance, and then 9 rebellions later, I was doing that exact same job. So go figure. But I got hired there. Let the electronic music thing completely go. Still didn't have a thought about the blog in mind. And I just focused like crazy on making myself the best possible high school orchestra director I could be, building this program, which is already amazing, into something that I could put a little bit of my own stamp on, and I was just so thrilled and excited. And we are going to hear from another couple of our sponsors, and we will be right back with a little bit more about aligning your life's goals, my career, my path, and what I've learned in this more recent phase. This episode is brought to you by Steve Swan String Bass. And Steve has been researching top regraduation for many years. Here's Steve on the topic.
I found some old diagrammed bass tops in an old violin making book that had violins, violas, cellos, and only 4 basses from kind of the classic period, the early 1800s. And I took a pattern of kind of a topographical map of thicker in the center under the bridge, and then the thinnest is right near the edges, just before it flares out and gets strong again. And I put in some measurements that I thought would work, and we use that as a general pattern for top regraduation, and it really works.
You would be amazed how well this technique works. I've been impressed time and time again at how immediately a bass speaks after coming from Steve's shop, and how resonant and beautiful and open the sound is. Learn more at steveswanstringbass.com, and thanks for sponsoring the podcast. Upton Bass is at a fascinating transition from selling accessories online, kind of in the early days, to selling other people's basses, to starting to make their own basses, which they now do and make over 120 a year. Here are Eric and Gary of Upton Bass on that transition.
So then we stopped getting containers of instruments,
right? Yeah,
which was
a lot of dough all at once. So it was taxing, and the quality was going down with every shipment, And at that point, we were doing so much ourselves, anyways. Final assembly, varnish, setup. It was kind of a no-brainer to start making them in-house.
Whatever your playing needs are, Upton Bass will find you an instrument that works with your budget and that you will love for the long term. They have an amazing, loyal fan base that has bought, several people have bought 2, 3, even 4 Upton Basses over the years. They stand behind their products. They're beautiful instruments made in the Northeast in the United States. UptonBass.com, and thanks so much for sponsoring the podcast. And we're back. And thank you again to the sponsors for making this thing happen. It's a crazy business putting together something like this podcast. There's a reason why I quit for 5 years. It is an overwhelming amount of work and a complex thing for sure, no matter how frequently or infrequently you put out episodes. And these folks make it viable and sustainable, and I just can't thank them enough. So thank you to Gary from Upton, Steve Swan, D'Addario, the Bass Violin Shop, Colstein, and everybody who's supported the podcast over the years. I just can't thank you enough. And thank you for listening too. That's we do this for you. I do this for you. Yes, I enjoy doing this, and I would do this even if nobody listened, but it warms my heart to know people are listening and to hear from people. And so let's get into that. How did this thing that you're listening to come back and get millions and millions of listens, and what sort of, again, series of Jason Heath rebellions led to that? Well, so I was teaching at Vernon Hills High School is the name of the school. Just an awesome place. The kids called it Vernon Thrills, ironically, because it's in the suburbs. But it's a great place, a great school, great music program. Just couldn't ask for a better place. Well, so my wife, this whole time, also in her own rebellion, had quit music and gone to medical school and was finishing medical school and doing her intern year, and had a whole bunch of choices. She was doing really well. She had looked into most of the radiology as her specialty, looked into programs across the country, but focusing on Chicago, and maybe Ann Arbor was the furthest out one. We really thought that we were going to stick in Chicago. Well, she got an interview at University of California, San Francisco, UCSF, which is the top program in the country for radiology. And she was just so honored to have gotten that opportunity that she thought, well, this will be great. I get a vacation to San Francisco, and I've never been to San Francisco. This is my wife's words, paraphrasing my wife. and I'll do the interview, and I'm sure it won't go anywhere, but I'm just so happy to go there. Well, she went out there, and it was obvious they were genuinely interested in her. So she came back home, and we said, oh, well, maybe we should do a trip to San Francisco. I had never been. So we go to San Francisco. It's February. And it was a particularly nice February. I now realize in San Francisco, it's been raining here for like weeks. So it was about 70 degrees and sunny when we landed. I was walking around in a t-shirt, walking up and down the hills in Cow Hollow and the Richmond and all these neighborhoods, and just absolutely enchanted by this magical place. And I remember even turning to my wife and saying, or certainly thinking, I think I said it though, I can't argue with this. It would be irrational to argue with this. I was so in love with that high school orchestra job. I had landed the job of my dreams. I really did think that. I do still think that. That job was awesome. It is awesome. And only not an idiot. It would be weird, super weird to give up that job in my headspace where I was at the time. Okay, and I didn't give up the job. I said, well, this is great. The San Francisco thing is great. Rank it first and we'll just see what happens. And we'll figure out the living situation, and I can live apart, and we'll just make it work. We'll make it work if it happens. Well, it happened. So I knew this move was coming. And I had decided at that moment when we were walking around San Francisco, this could work, but I have my career, and I've built my career, and I've had my 9 rebellions, but I like what I do. And we had gotten into some really major events with that high school job. We were doing a trip to Cuba. We had gotten a performing slot at the Midwest Clinic, which if you're not in the education world, you have no idea what that is, but that's like the Super Bowl of high school orchestra and band opportunities. So we gotten picked. We were one of 4, I think 3 that year, symphonic orchestras from the country to play. So that was a really big deal. And I said, okay, well, I'll move into an apartment. We can pay this crazy, stupid San Francisco living expenses plus my like meager, crappy bachelor pad expenses on my salary and my wife's kind of honorarium salary from UCSF. So we'll make it work. Then I was totally miserable, and I realized, okay, this has to end. So in the midst of all this adulation at the high school level, that might seem like a weird word for it, but it's true. It was like a totally amazing year. I decided, I think within those first few weeks, this is in 2015, fall of 2015, I'm out, rebel again. I'm going to quit the best job, or one of the best couple jobs like this in the state of Illinois, which is one of the best states for being a music educator, financially and artistically and in so many ways. And I'm going to just set fire to it all, like I did with my freelance career a few years before that, and move out. So I knew that was going to happen, but I didn't tell anybody. I waited for this Midwest Clinic, which happened in December of 2015, waited for that to pass, let that happen. And after winter break, I knew I was going to go in and talk to the powers that be and just let them know, hey, I'm out, give them plenty of time to find somebody. And I would move to San Francisco and walk dogs or do whatever the heck it was that I was going to do. So again, life's not in alignment here for Jason. All sorts of things going every which way, and tons of stress, and loving what I'm doing and know I'm going to give it up, and looking for jobs in San Francisco and realizing, oh, California is not the same for teaching as Illinois, and it's not the same. It's a very different world financially and otherwise. I learned, and so what am I going to do? What do I want to do? I was turning 40 or coming up on 40. I'd already had several different careers. I'd set fire to a few of them already. And I thought, what do I want to spend my time doing? And I said this in the last episode, just about these 7 goals I came up with, but growing and developing, traveling, exploring interesting projects, essentially, is what I wanted to do, not necessarily worrying about what specific type of job I was going to do. So I decided to relaunch the podcast because that was something I could do with my time while I was living apart with my wife. And I thought, it's better than watching all the Netflix I've been watching, and let's just get this thing going. And it was a different era for podcasting. All of a sudden, before I knew it, I was getting 100,000 downloads a month within the first couple months of getting the podcast up and rolling. And then I realized what I'd missed about it. And it was really fun to get back into that groove. And I felt like I was kind of in alignment with all those things that I loved from my childhood. And while I was loving the teaching so much, and I loved that electronic music so much, I felt like I was home again when I was getting back into that world of bass. And I was home, and I am home, and I do so many other things besides bass. A lot of people wonder what I do with my time. Bass is a big part of what I do, and you listening probably know me as a bass player, but a lot of people think of me as the orchestra guy for their organization, or in some other capacity like that. So my life has grown to be fairly complex professionally, but I love it. And regardless of what I'm doing, I am thinking about those images that I talked about at the beginning, about those arrows. Are the arrows moving forward? That's beautiful. Everything's moving in alignment. The things I'm doing at 10 a.m. have some relationship to the things I'm doing at 2 p.m. Those arrows circling each other. Are my projects feeding each other? Is the interview that I'm doing on Monday going to help with the blog post I'm writing on Tuesday? And is that going to inspire me to put together the presentation that I'm doing next month, the keynote that I'm putting together, or the panel discussion? And then is that panel discussion going to feed into a video that I'm working on? And is that all going to bleed over into a masterclass that I'm doing? And that's a beautiful thing. And then whatever project I'm doing, can I see that 3-dimensionality, all those other projects emanating from that one project? And I think about that sort of thing all the time. Like I said in the last episode, I evaluate what comes across my desk on a scale of 1 to 10. I do not use 7. So things that are 8 or above, I go for. Things that are below 6 or below, I gracefully decline and pass along to other people that would be thrilled to do them. Do I deviate from this path? Do I make mistakes? Oh my goodness, yes. I have had several opportunities come up here, a little more traditional jobs in the Bay Area, and I have gone for them, and I have not gotten any of them. And for all these, not that many, but a few, and I was so annoyed every time this happened with myself, not with the situation, but with myself, for not recognizing the opportunity for what it was. And it's hard, it's so easy to look back on life and see the orderliness versus the moment, which can feel like total chaos, right? And you never know what's coming, but that scale of 1 to 10, and then looking at that opportunity, and does it serve the other interests in my life? Can I repurpose that opportunity for other projects that I'm passionate about? Some of those traditional opportunities that came along that I did not get I would have been able to do some of the repurposing, but they were largely traditional jobs. And now here, 2019, I'm glad that they didn't work out. I feel like it's for the best. So I hope this is valuable. These are the sort of things that I think about a lot, whether it's when I'm on a long walk, or I wake up at 5 a.m. and go down to the gym and start thinking, or things I'm sketching out on my iPad Pro when I'm coming out with ideas for articles and that sort of thing. And you know what? Talking about aligning and repurposing, I'm probably going to take these episodes at some point and turn them into blog posts, or turn them into videos, or turn them into something. And I encourage you, if you're jamming on some of the similar projects like what I do, think about repurposing. Think about getting what you're spending your time doing in alignment. I really do believe we're much freer and more flexible than we give ourselves credit for. We're not as boxed in as we may feel like we are, and though it may seem like our opportunities are limited or our time is limited or our time is not our own, you can change. I have changed so many times in my 43? Am I 43? I'm somewhere around 43. I think I'm 43. No, I'm turning 43. Anyway, I'll shut up. In my 42 and 3/4 years, I have changed careers so many times. And I know I'll continue to do that and grow and evolve. But as long as I'm staying in alignment with what I'm really excited about, I know it's going to be a good ride. I hope this was valuable. I will not do that many of these, going forward. I have not done many of these, so this won't become a Jason Heath confessional podcast. But this is just a little bit about me, what I think about, what's going on in my life, what has been going on in the last few years. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to the podcast team, Trevor Jones, Mitch Mooring, Mike Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Krista Copper. What great folks. Thank you for doing all that you do for the podcast. Thank you for listening. Please like and share. I don't know if anybody in your life would benefit from this, but if they do, feel free to share this episode. Reach out to me, feedback@contrabassconversations.com. Follow us on all the social media. We're hanging out wherever you hang out, I'm sure. I'm Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.